a very long time how long to wait for YouTubers to put out their favorites of 2022. And I've decided I'm impatient and I want to start reading, so we're gonna do this now. Hi, it's Jessi and Happy New Year! Today I am drinking Mackinac Breeze from Great Lakes Tea and Spice. This is a blend of Salem black tea, juniper berries, black currants, and strawberry bits. Gotta be honest, looking at it, not a lot of those latter three in here. It's mostly black tea and corn flour, which isn't listed on the ingredients. Anyway, we're not gonna get into that. This is definitely still way too hot to drink, so you'll just have to wait for me to drink it till later in the video. So today I'm here to start a reading vlog, reading YouTubers' favorites. I'm doing it a little bit different than I did last year for a couple reasons, mostly because that was a ton of work, and also because I'm not so interested in getting a general look at what YouTube is interested in now. I'm more interested in narrowing it down to my tastes. So I've made a playlist and it's only YouTubers I'm subscribed to. I tried adding whenever YouTube recommended a video. I was like, if they have at least one book on their favorites list that I also loved, I will include it. And I watched like 5 or 6 and none of them qualified. So I scrapped that. These are Booktubers that I am subscribed to. These are their favorites. So this first spreadsheet is just everybody with their favorites. And I gave books a rating from -1 to +2 based on my opinion on the book. If I haven't read it, it's a 0. If I didn't like it, it's a -1. Liked it is a 1. Loved it is a 2. And then I averaged that out. And I'm going to be picking the top 3, let me explain why, that had similar taste to me to read something else off of their favorite list. And I'm not going to take my time to go through all of this. I will link this down below if you want to see what I did. So that leaves me with one booktuber that obviously has the closest taste to mine. That's Jess Owen. She got an average rating of 0.6. So we had Middle Game, I'm Glad My Mom Died, and Babel in Common, all of which are books I absolutely love. So I will definitely be reading something off of Jess Owen's list. And then 2 that were coming in very, very close underneath those. So It's Bells got a 0.56, and Meg with Books got a 0.57. So Meg and Bells, I'll be picking books off of their list as well. If they have something in common, I will probably read that, whatever they have in common, because that makes sense. Although I don't think they do. But I want to find out what I'm reading from the popular list first, because I want to read those plus books off of their list that are maybe a little underhyped, underrated. So let's go ahead and look at that list. So here's our ones. We're just going to skim over them. One thing I did notice, a lot of these are things that were popular 1 or 2 years ago. And I think that really comes down to when they're new releases, a lot more people are reading them at the same time. And so the ones that are having them as favorites now are ones that are getting to them a little bit later. So getting to our 2 votes here. Some of these are ones I actually would be really interested to read, but we'll see if maybe Meg or somebody else put them on their list. All right, now we're getting to our 3s. And we have our top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll count our 3s. Babel. Obviously. I already read Babel, loved it, I agree. I'm Glad My Mom Died, same thing. Already read it, loved it. Book Lovers. I forgot Emily Henry had a book released this year. So Book Lovers, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow like I expected. These will probably be the 2 that I read. Although All My Rage, How High We Go in the Dark, and Our Wives Under the Sea, and even The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, I'm very interested in all of those. I did read Legends and Latte, and honestly, hype's pretty accurate for that, and that surprises me. But these 2, Book Lovers, tomorrow and tomorrow, I will put a hold on my library. We'll let you know when they get there. I guess I should go back and look at what I'm going to read from other ones. All right, we're going to go with, because these are ones I want to read anyway. For Meg, we're going to read Wrong Place, Wrong Time. For Bells, we're going to go ahead and read Comfort Me with Apples, because I already have that on hold, and I can already have that and can get started immediately. And then for Jess, who do I want to read for Jess? I kind of want to go with Half a Soul, because this is one wasn't even on my radar until Jess mentioned it. And I think that'll be interesting to read. Something just so completely out of left field. So that's my TBR for this. Half a Soul. What was it for Wrong Place, Wrong Time, Comfort Me with Apples, Book Lovers, and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This is an eclectic TBR, but I'm really excited for it. I'm a chapter into Comfort Me with Apples, about 15%. It's really short, so I don't want to take too long to update you. So I'm reading this because it's Belle's. It was on It's Belle's favorites of 2022. So we had a lot in common. She had a longer list, so there's a lot more in common. So Comfort Me with Apples so far, I hopefully will get it physically, but I'd already put a hold on the audiobook, coincidentally, unrelated to this. So Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. This is about this woman, Sophia, who is the perfect wife, and she lives in this perfect town where everything is safe, but there's also some rules that are a little weird, like they aren't allowed to stay out after dark, or she's not allowed to go to the basement. And I don't know if it's like a weird predisposition because I know this is horror, or if it's actually just written the way it's written, but it's so creepy. So like before the first chapter, like there's this like homeowners agreement before that, and it's so creepy. Like for the homeowners association, the HOA, like it's a gated community, you know, there's an agreement you have to sign of certain rules. You can only paint your house certain colors, things like that, which are pretty standard for HOAs. It's part of why I think HOAs are dumb, but we don't need to get into that. But like the colors they can paint their house are things like eggshell, all right, mother's milk, you know, it's creepy. Like the whole thing just had a very creepy tone to it. And then this first chapter is her just kind of talking about what her day is. And it's just very eerie. But so this is, I mean, quite a few people I watch have read this book and liked it, or I think everybody's liked it. There might be some people that didn't like it as much. It's weird. But something I don't think I've seen anybody mention is, and maybe because it's in the synopsis and it's so obvious you don't mention it, or maybe because they feel it's a spoiler, I don't know. All of the other people that Sophia is talking about are all animals. Like, whether they're actually animals or not, I don't know. But it's all like, it's Mrs. Lamb and Mr. Moray and things. And then there's something about the way she's talking about this house she lives in that gave me dollhouse feelings. And I'm not sure if that's what it is. Like, there's like, the staircase isn't actually built to her dimensions, or you know, everything is kind of mismatched and doesn't quite go together well. And it just feels like a dollhouse. So it like feels like maybe these are the stuffed animals, but also like a lot of them are animals you wouldn't have, like a child wouldn't have a stuffed animal of a moray eel, probably. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's very atmospheric, very creepy, but this is a really short audiobook. It's like 2.5 hours. I'm already like a big chunk of the way into it, and I've only read one chapter, so I think this is probably the last time I'll update you until I finish, but maybe after I cook dinner, maybe I can stop a little early before I finish it and let you know my thoughts at like 70%, but so far, very into the creepy vibes. I'm drawing myself a bath, and I came into the other room to film because I thought it was too loud in the bathroom. Turns out it's pretty darn loud in here too. I finished Comfort Me with Apples. I knew it wasn't going to take me very long. It's a short book. I really, really liked it. It drags in the middle for a little bit. It kind of goes, drag is an exaggeration. It kind of makes it sound worse than it is. Basically what happened is, in the book, once we started getting explanations for things, I found myself almost regretting that. Like, I almost didn't want the explanations. So that part where we first start getting answers was definitely a dip to me. And then things kind of get clearer and we realize what's going on, and then it goes back up. It doesn't quite ever get as high to me as the beginning part. That like eerie, mysterious, creepy part at the beginning really just captured me. And I know you can't have a book do that forever. Like, you have to have some sort of resolution of some kind or something, you know. You can't just have an entire book be vibes. But I kind of liked the vibes more than I liked anything else. It's also kind of a weird book to rate because I rate my books, I mean, it's been a while since I've talked about this, on a system of different things. And characters are what's weighted the most in this system. And the characters are definitely the weakest part of this, but they're also not supposed to be complicated, and so I kind of am going back and forth on that. Right now I have the rating is sitting at a 4.25. It might go up. It might end up closer to 4.5. I haven't quite settled on where I'm gonna go with those characters, whether I rate that middle of the road, not low, because there's not a lot to them, or whether I rate that a little bit higher because that's intentional. Regardless, though, I really loved this, so I think this just confirmed that it's Bells and I have similar tastes, and she's somebody I can trust for recommendations. I am still very much working out the kinks of this new apartment for filming. Right now, it's that the lighting in here sucks during not the daytime. I am about 30% into Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I actually didn't expect to be reading this one next. I mean, it's what I wanted to read next, but the hold was taking so long. Both I had the audiobook and the physical hold in at my library. And the hold for book lovers came in, so I was like, maybe I'll read that one first. Not what I wanted to do, but and then the audiobook came in, which is great. I'm liking this. This is fun. So the premise here is there's these two kids, Sam and Sadie, who meet in the hospital. Sam is in the hospital because he was just in a car accident, and Sadie is there because her sister is being treated for cancer. And they meet and they play video games. And then they have a falling out. A lot of clips say why they have a falling out, but I think it's kind of, I guess it's not really a spoiler, but anyway, better safe than sorry. They have a falling out and they don't talk for 6 years, and then they reconnect while they're at college in Boston. Sadie is going to MIT for programming, I assume. Maybe video game design is an MIT major, I don't know. And Sam is going to Harvard studying math. And they're both kind of at this crossroads in their life where, like, Sadie wants to go into video games, but she's going through something. I won't specify what. Sam is majoring in math. He's good at math, but he's not really sure he has any passion for math. So he's not sure that's what he really wants to be doing. And they happen to bump into each other, and it kind of takes off from there. And it's told in this very non-linear way. I mean, there's the linear story of them reconnecting in college, at least where I'm at, you know. But occasionally you get snippets of interviews from them later in life. So we know that they go on to make a lot of video games together from very early on. So we get snippets of like interviews and stuff with them from later. And then we get flashbacks to their lives individually, plus their lives as kids when they knew each other. And I think it's really neat. I think we're getting a lot of interesting representation in this. We have Sam is half Korean and half Jewish. His mom is Korean, and then his father is Jewish American. I don't know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's white. And then Sadie is Jewish also. I think she's white, but I'm enjoying it. I think the voice with which it's told is very interesting. I really like the non-linear storytelling. I know that's not everybody's favorite, but I'm enjoying it just because I think everything is done so purposefully. It's not like one chapter from this point of view, or from this timeline, then another chapter from this. Like, it's not a very clean back and forth, which I think is good. I think it's being very intentional about when it flashes back and what those flashbacks are saying. I also just really like both Sadie and Sam as characters. They play off each other really well. And there's something almost cartoonish about both of them, but they're still very grounded. I don't really know how to articulate that because how can they be both, right? How can they be unrealistic yet also realistic, you know? But there is something about them, and I think they definitely play off each other a lot. Like, Sadie is more of a dreamer. Sam is more... No, I don't know if that's realistic to say either. Like, one of the scenes, the scene where they reunite... Am I talking too much about this for this not to be the final clip? Whatever. The scene where they reunite, there's a magic eye picture that they're looking at. And Sadie takes the time. She's very careful and very particular, and she's going to do it correctly because she wants to see it. Sam, meanwhile, takes about 15 seconds to look at it and figures, I'm not going to get this, and then stops. And I think that, like, shows a lot about their character of, like, Sadie is going to do things the right way. Sam isn't going to waste his time. Things like that. I think it's really... I like them as a pair. and I'm excited to see more of them. Plus, after reading Meet Me in Another Life by Catriona Silvoy, which I am going to mention as much as possible because it's probably my favorite book of 2023, I really like more of these platonic bonds in fiction. I'm like really just in that mood, so I'm loving that. I'm trying to film in different locations in my apartment, so this vlog doesn't get too visually the same. There are still boxes everywhere because, as it turns out, it takes about 2 months to unpack. Anyway, I finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow this morning, and I've given myself some time to pause and relax a little before I launch into talking about it, because honestly, I don't want to come across too negative and too harsh, but I think I'm going to be coming across a little negative on this one. So I really liked the first half I loved the first half of this. I was convinced this was about to be a favorite. I was going to be raving about it. I was having a really good time. And then the middle section from about, 60 to like 70%, 60 to like 80, 90%. One of the things I really, really liked about the beginning changed. And I can't say specifically what it was, although I guess I could mention, I did mention it in my first clip. Not literally, like, it didn't actually change, but there were like hints about it, and there were thoughts about it from the characters, and I did not care for that. But I was like still really enjoying it, and so I was like, okay, let me roll my eyes. This is doing this thing I didn't want it to do. But then around the 75% mark, there is a specific thing that happens. I can't tell you what it is because that's obviously spoilers. There's, for anybody that has read the book, there's a point of view change, and I think that'll really ground you on what I'm talking about. And I kind of hated it. I hated it for a few different reasons. One, the specific event felt, how do I put this? Unnecessary to be what that was, and it felt a little bit about like, the whole book had been having different, political topics were being brought up. And some of them were done well, some of them weren't. Like, gay marriage was a focus that I really enjoyed, and I kind of bawled my eyes out at one point, whatever. But then, like, when 9/11 happened, it was just kind of a weird moment in the book. Like, it was like the author felt, well, I need to mention that this happened because it was a major point of American history, but it didn't really matter that it had happened. I mean, it did a little, but not really, so it was, like, weird that it was even mentioned, And so this event kind of felt that way to an extent to me. Like, this is a thing that people were talking about, still are talking about. So almost like she felt she needed to include it. But I don't know, it just felt weird. And like, I understand why something needed to happen for the rest of the story to progress the way it was going to. But then, I don't know, I didn't like that section. And from then on, I liked the rest of the book considerably less than I had liked the first 3/4, 2/3, 3/4 of it. I don't know, like, there's a section we finally get to see somebody play one of the games and like get in depth, like, this is what the game was like, except she does it as like a storytelling device where you see it's like a character in the game, but it's like they're living their life. And so I knew as a reader very quickly this was a video game. And so it felt unrealistic as a video game because that's not how you play video games. Like, no matter how open world your RPG is, your MMORPG is, there are always going to be limitations. And so, like, the way this was happening felt like you didn't really have any limitations. You could do whatever you want. And I was like, that's not really how that works. And then I also knew what was happening in that section. And then it just dragged on. Like, I felt myself slowly increasing the speed of my audiobook to just get through that section so we could get to the point where the character figures out what's happening. The ending was cute, though. The ending was kind of sweet, brought it back together. But that whole section that I didn't like, that one-off point of view section, the narrator changed to, which was jump scare. So that one-off point of view section and that video game section, gameplay section, really brought out all the things that had been kind of bothering me about the first half of the book, but like I was ignoring for the things I liked. Like that the characters aren't very distinct. They all kind of sound the same. And I kind of alluded to this at the beginning when I was trying to talk about how like Sam and Sadie are foils for each other and are different, but then I was like, wait, they're not. And like, I don't know if the narrator made this worse than it actually was if I had read the book physically, or this is just, it was written that way. Like their dialogue is all the same. Like they all use these weird expressions that don't feel entirely natural, and all of the characters do stuff like that. And so that bothered me, but it kind of did, like it almost felt intentional because these characters are almost just vehicles for the story that was being told. But when the story wasn't as strong to me, then the characters all feeling the same became part of the problem. And then the whole thing with this is that it's Sadie and Sam coming together, falling apart, having conflicts, talking, becoming really close, not talking, you know, distancing each other from each other. But it really felt, other than that initial inciting incident, that was almost entirely driven by Sadie. And I hated thinking that because I kept finding myself checking myself to being like, is this a subconscious sexist thing that I'm like, oh, this silly woman is just driving silly conflict. But like it consistently was her, and it was all very consistently her making assumptions about what Sam was thinking, or making assumptions about why Sam was doing the things, and Sam would reach out and try to fix things, and he wouldn't let him. And obviously there were reasons for that. It's not like there was no reason for that, but it just got very frustrating, and it felt very artificial to me at a lot of sections throughout this. And not to say that Sam was perfect. Sam was far from perfect. He wasn't good at communicating. He never really let anybody in on who he was, or who his life. Like he wasn't a perfect character, and I'm not trying, but like specifically the conflict between Sam and Sadie just felt so one-sided from Sadie all the time, and it was anyway, it was exhausting, and I just kind of ended up not caring by the end. Like the last, like, I don't know, 10-20% of this book, I was just like, is it over yet? Like I was kind of expecting the ending to have been something more interesting to bring it back together. Like I was really hoping, I don't know what I was hoping for, but it kind of fell flat for me in the end. I haven't done my rating. You'll have to check Storygraph or my Twitter or whatever to see what my rating is, because I'm not going to say it in the video because I didn't say it for the last book, so why would I say it for this one? Anyway, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, which was Meg with Books, one of her favorites. I already have the audiobook loan, so I'll probably start this sometime in the next day or two. And I wasn't expecting to dislike that. And I'm not saying I hated it. Like, I still think there's some good things about it. There's some really sweet themes. Like, it's still got an emotional connection to me. Although, again, later parts of the book started to feel like it was trying to manipulate my emotions, which I always hate. Once I, like, feel the book doing things to make me feel a certain way, it backfires. And it started to feel that way. And then, again, it put all that first section in perspective and suddenly made me think, wait, was this doing that? And now suddenly the emotions I had been feeling feel out of place. So I don't know. I'm going to wait a while before I even rate it, because I think I need to let myself kind of calm down from the disappointment that was the second half of this book. I just, like, unlike when I did last year, like, right? I'm ranting too long. This is unnecessary. Last year I did this expecting to hate the books. This year I went into it thinking I was really going to like these books. Like the books at the top were like books I was actually excited for. And so it's kind of disappointing to have this one just kind of be Welcome to my closet. My partner's playing some games with some friends, and I wanted to make sure I was as far from the sound of that as possible, so you wouldn't pick up on it. Plus, it's a new location and honestly kind of cute. Maybe the other side would be more interesting, but for now, it'll work. I'm about almost halfway through Wrong Place, Wrong Time, and I've been waiting to update because I've been really, really hoping I would have something remotely interesting to share about what I'm thinking. Sorry, I can't find a comfortable way to sit. And so far, nothing remotely interesting. Or at least interesting and positive. Here's the honest truth. I am bored. I'm not really latching onto this. the premise. This book is a mother. She's waiting up late for her son to get home, and she has this feeling. So she goes, looks outside, and sees her son stabbing somebody. And then she wakes up the next day, and it's the day before, and on and on. And so she's like going backwards, and she's convinced that she has to prevent her son killing this guy. And here's the thing. A couple things with this. One, there's a detective point of view that nobody in any of their synopses ever talks about. That there's this detective that is on a case that's obviously going to relate to her son. And it's unclear where his point of view falls in all of this. Like, is this... Where does he fit in this timeline? And her timeline's going backwards, but his, I think, is going forward. So it's like, how do these line up? Is very confusing, and it just feels weird. But also for me, it was very clear very early on, this is not about the mystery of her son, right? Like, it is. But it's also about her insecurities as a mother. So she is a lawyer, and she spends a lot of time... Her son was an unplanned pregnancy. I mean, she's very happy to have him, but, like, she is not the most natural mother. She is not what you would typically think of a quote-unquote good mother. And that's totally fine. But she is clearly very insecure about this. Like, there's talks about how when she's, think about, like, when she goes to pick up her kid from school, it's so much pressure that she's got to be the right kind of mom, and she doesn't do that often enough. And, and it feels very clear to me that that's what the actual theme of this book is. It's not just this mystery of what is her son caught up in that he would lead to him stabbing somebody, right? The other thing really bothering me is that it's not a Groundhog Day situation, right? Groundhog Day is like, here's this one day. He wakes up in the morning, plays the day out, goes to bed at night, wakes up the same day, right? I think that's the most typical example given. I'm not even sure it's the first ever written. But anyway, the problem is that she wakes up the day before. She never makes it back to that same night. So she has no way of knowing if what she's doing is having any impact. She doesn't know if she's changing the timeline. She doesn't know anything. And, like, the idea is that she's gaining more information, and so the, like, intrigue is supposed to be we're figuring out why he did this. But to me, I thought this was going to be about her preventing him from doing that. And I guess, obviously, ultimately knowing why he did it would lead to preventing him from doing it, but it's just... I'm just kind of bored. That's really it. I'm going to keep going. I almost DNF'd. I keep thinking about DNFing it, but I've recently DNF'd something, and there's another book I'm reading right now that I'm probably going to DNF. I just want to get a little further before I, like, confirm that's what's going to happen. And I know when I get in a habit of DNFing books, I just keep doing it, and that's what gets me in a slump. I just need to keep pushing through, and so this is the one I'm going to, like, make myself finish. If I don't finish it by tomorrow, I probably maybe will DNF it, because I don't really want to commit any more time to it, and I have other holds coming in that I'm so much more excited for. So, a little disappointed in this one so far, but maybe the second half will turn it around. I think you're crooked, but I've been playing with angles for like 10 minutes. And I think we're just gonna have to live with it. Next Christmas, I'm asking for a tripod. Alright, I finished Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. I did not want to pick up this book today to save my life. I normally on the weekends I start my day off by laying in bed for like an hour or two, listening to an audiobook and playing solitaire. And today I watched YouTube videos. I just could not, for the life of me, make myself want to read this. Luckily, I had chores to do them, and I had to be moving around, so I could put the audiobook on while I did some chores, and that helped. So I finished it. Did I like it? No. As soon as the, like, cop point of view started dropping names, I figured out the gist of what was going on. Not the entirety, but a large portion of it, you know? And once I did that, it was just kind of waiting for the main character, Jen, waiting for Jen to catch up with what I knew. And I hate that feeling in any book. It was part of what really annoyed me with some sections of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It was anytime I knew what was going on. So this year is just, it doesn't want to stay where I want it to stay. So that was annoying, and I hated it. And then the stuff that I hadn't figured out, the like reveals that filled in the rest of it, made me dislike it more. In particular, I think it kind of makes Kelly out to be really, really stupid. Because I don't know how to talk about it without spoilers. Like what particular, I mean, I was bored the whole time, but what took it from boredom to dislike? I don't know how to talk about that without spoilers. I'm going to do quick spoilers. Just skip ahead a couple minutes. I'll have it on the screen. The whole reveal that I realized Kelly was undercover. That I figured out pretty quickly as soon as like started Ryan's perspective name dropped Kelly as his brother. I started putting things together and I was like, he is Kelly. I figured that out pretty quickly. The actual timeline took me longer to figure out, although I definitely also figured that out before Jen's point of view had entirely revealed it, although questionable about like intents, whether that should have been obvious at that point or not, I don't know, but I figured that out. And the whole idea that Kelly broke the law, burned his entire real life, like his mom gone, for him, over a woman he has known less than a week. Wild. I can't with that. I love my partner. We've been together 5.5, more than 5 years, 6 years. Maybe I would cut off my family for him now. Big maybe. Certainly wouldn't have done it when I'd only known him a week. And so this whole idea that Kelly or Ryan did that is beyond wild to me. But on top of that, we know Jen gets pregnant like within that time frame. Like it's not like they've known each other for a while. They'd gone on, it was that like first like torrid quick whirlwind romance bit is where she gets pregnant, if I'm not totally misremembering the book. How does a man who is an undercover cop dating somebody that he is, first off, why do you go on a date with somebody that you're studying, that you're watching, that whatever, but then to then not take every precaution possible, it's just stupid. Anyway, I didn't enjoy that. I think mystery just might not be the genre for me. I've only read a handful and I keep thinking like, well, I haven't read nearly enough to know. And, I keep thinking, well, let me try this one. So like this one had this time travel thing. That's different. Maybe I'll like that. I just don't think mysteries are for me. I don't. Also, like I said, just anyway. Next book on my list, the one and only one that my library has actually managed to get to me physically. Gosh, the whole lists. Booktubers by Emily Henry. So I will get started on this soon. It didn't actually end up being on the list, but I know it was on a couple YouTube favorite lists, so I just figured I'd mention I just finished Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, and I loved it. I'd love to share more thoughts with you, but I can't for this vlog. But if you want to see my reviews for books, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Storygraph. That's where I post full reviews. The more comprehensive reviews are usually on my Instagram story, so those are your best place for them, but Twitter's also a pretty good spot to see all my thoughts on every book I read. Okay, let's talk about Booktubers by Emily Henry. Right now I'm drinking Christmas green tea from Fordham and Mason. Okay, so Booktubers. This is Emily Henry's third big book. Apparently she had a bunch of books before People We Meet on Vacation got popular, but that's the only one people talk about. The premise of this is Nora is a literary agent known to be kind of a shark. She really fights for her clients, but also she is the stereotypical villain in a Hallmark rom-com. You know, she is the big city woman that the hero goes on a trip to a small town and then leaves her for some small town lady. And that's Nora. But her sister is pregnant and wants to take a trip to the small town that was in a book Nora represented. And so they go on this trip, and there Nora runs into a book editor that she's had some trouble with in the past. And it turns out he lives there. And the romance theoretically is between these two people, but the one thing you'll hear in a lot of the reviews for this book that I would have to agree with is that this isn't hugely a romance. And while this is something I'm not gonna enter into the romance versus women's fiction discussion because I am by far the least qualified person to have that argument, but also because I hate the term women's fiction because it just feels like a way to dismiss literary fiction written for women. The fact that we are 8 chapters in, a quarter of the way through the book, and she's only started to really have interactions with the love interest. This is really more about Nora's relationship with her sister. They used to be really, really close, but lately in the last couple months, they've been distant, and so she's trying to reconnect with her sister. I think what'll almost certainly be revealed at some point is that her sister's fine, and that Nora is just overly attached, which is very clearly already like the case. Like, Nora is, it's giving unhealthy. The whole thing is that Nora and her sister, their dad left before Sissy was even born. Not Sissy, that's not right. Whatever, before she was even born. And then their mom died when they were young, when Nora was about 20 and her sister was about 16. And so she kind of helped raise her sister, and now she feels it's very much the same thing as like the way a mom feels when her baby girl is all grown up and doesn't need her anymore. That's what this feels like. So I don't know, I'm enjoying it so far. Emily Henry is really, really good at writing banter between her love interests, so I'm enjoying those scenes. But I do think I'm glad last year I read Emily Henry before I had read more romance, and I'm glad the order I read Emily Henry in to know to expect less romance, more literary. But I'm enjoying it. I'll let you know my final thoughts when I have finished this book. I'm going to try to keep this clip short because it is way past my bedtime. I stayed up late to watch the Super Bowl and finish reading Book Lovers. And I'm a little bit tipsy because I'm 2.5 beers in. So final thoughts on Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I didn't dislike it, but I definitely don't like it as much as the other Emily Henrys I've read. And whether that is more experience reading that genre or whether it is this book itself, I could not say. What I will say, this felt... similar is not the right word to use here because it's not actually similar to it, but I'm gonna use the word similar. It felt too much like Beach Read to me. Specifically the characters. I think there was something about their dynamic that was too similar to what was going on in Beach Read for me. I'm glad I went in with the expectation that this was going to be more about Nora and her sister, Libby. Because it definitely was. It actually felt like the romance plot was like the B plot to the conflict with her sister. But what ended up happening is those two storylines kind of fought for attention in this book, and I felt like the balance never quite was right. I always felt kind of like when I got interested, when I was really deep in the romance, it would switch to being more about her sister, and every time it did that, or vice versa, every time I did that, there was always a moment in the middle where I was like, just get to the point already. And it made the book feel much longer than it was. It really felt like this book was about 100 pages too long, and I don't know where I would trim that, and I think it just comes down to it being two different stories trying to be crammed in together. I thought the references to August and January were cute. I like a little Easter egg like that. But yeah. I do think Emily Henry, I mean, if you haven't read her books, she does banter between love interests fantastically. I love the tension she builds. Um, this one, if you've read her other books, has considerably less sex than the other ones, if that's something, or at least less sex than Beach Read, if that's something that affects your decision. But I just kind of overall just felt it wasn't as good. That's kind of what it comes down to. And not that it was bad, just wasn't as good. I also kind of felt predictable, and not the way that like a lot of romances are predictable. I actually think she avoids a lot of the cliches, and I'll circle back to that in a second. But just like I knew what Libby was up to, maybe around the halfway point. I knew what was going on, and it kind of got annoying to me that Nora hadn't figured it out yet, you know? But I do think the dynamics are cute between Nora and Libby, between Nora and Charlie. It's cute. There's a lot of cute dynamics going on. I think one of the things that did annoy me with this book is like what I said, the tropes. Bringing attention to romance tropes, and specifically rom-com tropes, and then subverting those is fine and dandy, but then when you're also falling into other romance tropes, it just feels a little bit contradictory. There's something about that that doesn't quite register well for me, because it just feels, I don't know, something about that just didn't work. So it got annoying because like tropes I wouldn't normally be bothered by, and I'm trying to think of a good example, but I can't right now. Tropes I wouldn't normally be bothered by suddenly bothered me because the book as a whole was drawing attention to romance tropes. I don't know. It was good. I'm not saying it's a bad book. I think it's a good book. I think it's especially good. Maybe if you're somebody that normally reads women's fiction or literary fiction and is looking to get into romance, it kind of bridges that gap really well, I think, as somebody that doesn't read a lot of literary or women's fiction. I feel like if you're a typical romance reader, it might be a bit of a letdown for you because the romance doesn't really get the focus. Like I said, ultimately, if you're going for this literary romance blend, I do think I enjoyed Beach Read considerably more. And if you want Emily Henry and you just want romance, I would go People We Meet on Vacation. But it wasn't bad. Good news? Maybe good news. Good news insofar as this vlog won't be like awkwardly ended. I don't know when Half a Soul is coming in from my library, but I've had A Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches on hold for a while, and the audiobook just came in. And that was also on Jess's list of favorites, so I'm going to go ahead and read that. I'm a little nervous because I've heard it compared to House on the Cerulean Sea a lot. But generally the comparison is, this is exactly like this and it's less good. So that makes me nervous because I didn't like Cerulean Sea. So maybe I won't like this. But I don't know. But that's what I will be reading, I guess. Okay. I'm about 40% of the way into The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and I'm really loving it. I was going to wait a little longer to update you, but things have kind of started developing a little more, so I kind of wanted to back off and wait a second. Or update now, rather than when I got more information. So this is about Mika, who is a witch. And witches very rarely gather, so there's a few different lore elements about witches in this. One is that they're always orphans. Their mothers almost always die, tragically. Well, I don't know about tragically, but their mothers almost always die, so they're raised, without their mothers, their parents. And then witches rarely gather together because magic gathers around witches, and the more magic there is, the harder it is to control. So witches generally try not to spend a lot of time around each other because then there's too much magic and it's hard to control. But Mika has been hired to become a kind of tutor to these 3 witch girls. And we kind of, so she goes to this manor house to live with them and teach them, and it is so cute. I think the comparisons to House on the Cerulean Sea are unfair. I get where the parallels can be made, but this is just infinitely more delightful than that ever was. And I think part of what works for this for me is that these are real humans. Not real, but they're humans. And I think that making them magical creatures, I mean, granted, they're humanoid and they're sentient creatures, but making them magic creatures kind of takes it a few steps too many to get the messages across, aside from the problems of white man co-opting indigenous culture, indigenous history to tell the story. Anyway, not getting into that, but this one, I think because these girls are human, you kind of get more real world action ability because they're all girls, they're all people of color. Not all the characters are, but our main character Mika is, and the three girls, I believe all three of them are, or at least two of them definitely are. So you get a lot of commentary coming through on being a minority in England, being, you know, not the dominant group in, specifically this is in England. And I think that's really well done, and it doesn't feel as big of a stretch, you know, because it's less allegorical and more true to life. And then the fantastical bits, the witchness, are used more to show, you know, isolation and explore themes of loneliness. And it's doing really well to do that. I really like Mika. The main male character that is obviously a love interest, I cannot remember his name right now. Jamie. So grumpy, and I love him. He's like Northern Irish too, so there's like that element getting added in when they're talking about the diversity here, but also like he's so delightfully grumpy and I love him, but also like it leans into that grumpy sunshine trope in a like a little tongue-in-cheek way, because he like tries to be grumpier than he really is, and he like comments on how sunshiny she is, and I think that was really cute. And these girls are really delightful. I think the fact that there's only 3 of them instead of a huge cast of characters really helps, because you have 3 of them and they're all a little bit different, and I'm having a lot of fun with this one, and I might finish it tonight because it's Friday night, so I might finish it tonight. I finished The Very Secret Society of Irregular, which is a few days ago, but I've been under the weather and not really up to recording. So we're going to do that today. We're going to discuss that and kind of wrap up this video. I loved it. It was so sweet and so cozy, and I really enjoyed it. There is one thing I kind of want to mention that comes kind of late in the book, but I'm glad I was aware it was going to happen going into it. So I think it's literally one person has mentioned this. I think it's Carrie Can Read. There is an explicit sex scene in this book. And I mention this because it's a huge tonal shift. This whole book is, I mean, it is romance. It does have a romantic plot, but like, the sex comes kind of out of left field. So I'm glad I was prepared for that. I thought it was really sweet. I think there's some really good messages there, both in kind of like what I said in my first clip. I think she does a really good job portraying real life issues through things that are real. So we have these kids are different races. We have our protagonist is not white. Things like that are used to talk about things like racism. You know, the gardener is Northern Irish. The 2 keepers of this house are a gay couple. And so the idea that there is the litigator finds them undesirable is a product of real life, not a product of this fictional world, and I think fantastical world, and I think that really helps drive home those messages. And then the fantastical is used to explore things like themes of isolation, right, which is something you can feel for a variety of reasons. In here there just happens to be kind of a fantastical excuse for it, And I think doing that was really well done because it doesn't trivialize anything. There's no way for you to put distance between things. Like, I don't know. I like magic and fantasy used as an allegory for real life issues, but I think that needs to be done very carefully to really work. And I think in this case, I think it was good that she went with the real life issues being portrayed by real life things. Yeah, I thought it was sweet. I liked the book a lot. I think that kind of finishes that. I really haven't been doing a good job giving ratings, so I'm going to go through and give you my ratings for each of these books. So we started this video with Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valenti off of It's Belle's reading favorites, and this was a 4.15 or a 4-star book. It's really good. I liked it. I don't think it's for everyone. I would have trouble recommending this to somebody that I didn't know would be okay with the weirdness of it, but it's a fun little short book. Then we did Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This was like the 4th most listed Booktube favorite. This got a 2.9 to 3-star. First half loved, second half kind of lost me. Then we did Wrong Place, Wrong Time. This was off of Make with Books list, and this one got a 2.18. Hated it. It just didn't work for me. Our Eyes Under the Sea wasn't technically for this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because I really loved it. Got a 4.6. It was delightful, and I think it was great. Book Lovers by Emily Henry, the only one of these I read physically because my library just apparently takes forever. I moved, and I'm at a new library, and this one, the holds, maybe, I mean, it's a bad thing to judge off of really popular books, but like, ooh, the holds. Anyway, Book Lovers, 3.33. This is, I think, on reflection, my least favorite Emily Henry I've read so far, because it sits in between the 3 I've read. You've got People We Meet on Vacation, which is very romance heavy. There is some heavy topics, and I don't like the way they're handled, but for the most part, it's just, this is a run-of-the-mill, friends to lovers romance, right? And it was sweet. Then you have Beach Read, which starts to add those contemporary elements and lean more on the heavy things, but she balances it really well because it's about these 2 characters. And I think where Book Lovers kind of fumbles is that even though it's about those 2 characters, you introduce the sister, and that's a whole 3rd element, and it just makes everything a little less seamless. And then finally, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, which got a 3.9, so also a 4-star book. I really love this. Again, delightful. Great way to end this. I don't have a conclusion from this. I mean, the 2 out of the 3 books that I specifically picked off of people's lists did really, really well, but also they're books I had already been interested in, so that. But this did worse than last year's video, and I kind of upset about that because last year I went into it expecting to kind of have some hot takes and not enjoy the books, and then this year I do it and I didn't enjoy the books, but I was hoping to. So we'll see. We'll do it again next year, maybe shift things up a little bit more, but I had a lot of fun. Hope you liked it too. Do all of the things. All right, bye. Love you.